And about a third of U.S. residents were under excessive heat advisories, and wildfires spread through parts of Southern California. Meanwhile, northwestern states were hammered with heavy storms and excessive rain, including in Pennsylvania, where authorities are searching for two young children after flash floods killed their mother and at least four other people. Well, the Biden administration said it will forgive $39 billion in student loans. The plan announced on Friday could help more than 800,000 borrowers. It's aimed at people who are enrolled in income-driven repayment plans. Now, this comes 2 weeks after the Supreme Court rejected President Biden's much broader plan to forgive over $400 billion in federal student loan debt. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a Republican presidential contender, said Saturday that he would consider Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds as his running mate as he criticized former President Donald Trump's recent complaint about her. The two governors, DeSantis and Reynolds, forged a bond at the height of the coronavirus pandemic. Senate Democrats plan to push ahead this week with legislation imposing new ethics rules on the Supreme Court in the wake of disclosures about the justices' travel and outside activities, despite blanket opposition by Republicans who claim the effort is intended to undermine the high court. Well, Labor Day looms as the crisis point in Hollywood's stalemate. The ongoing strike could disrupt the entertainment industry in fundamental ways, putting the 2024 box office and the fall broadcast lineup in serious jeopardy. Well, it seems former U.S. President Donald Trump already has a few controversial figures in mind for his running mate. He acknowledged the possibility of competitors like Vivek Ramaswamy, Senator Tim Scott, and even Robert Kennedy Jr., which, by the way, is running for president as a Democrat. The Reverend Jesse Jackson announced on Saturday that he is stepping down from the Rainbow Push Coalition after 52 years at the helm. Jackson, who is 81, announced his resignation as president during the Chicago-based civil rights group annual convention. He announced that he's passing the reins to the Reverend Frederick Douglass Haynes, a longtime student of Jackson and supporter of the Rainbow Push Coalition. Donald Trump and his allies are planning a sweeping expansion of presidential power over the machinery of government if voters return him to the White House in 2025, reshaping the structure of the executive branch to concentrate far greater authority directly in his hands. Well, historically Hispanic voters have voted in large numbers for Democrats. But in recent years, Republicans have peeled away some of that support, particularly during presidential election cycles. A recent Pew Research Center poll about the 2022 midterms found that Hispanic support for Democrats dropped from 72% in 2018 to 60% in 2022. Now, while Democrats still have an advantage, they did not win back voters. They appear to have lost to Republicans in years gone by. You are listening and watching Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. In this hour, I am joined by two of my favorite contributors, Professor Shayla Lawson. She's a professor at Amherst College, and she's the author of This is Major. And also joining us in this hour is Chris Scott. He is a Democratic strategist. And in hour two, we have two segments. The first segment, I'm going one-on-one with California Congressman Ro Khanna. Talk to him about politics, what's going on in Washington, D.C., and what he thinks about what's happening, particularly on the Republican presidential side. Lots of reports out this week about who's raising money and who hasn't raised very much money. You'll be surprised at one of the names that's at the bottom of the list for campaign contributions at this point in the presidential election, particularly on the Republican side. And in part 2 of Hour 2, we are talking about the story of Adam and Eve. One of the first in the book of Genesis in the Bible, is one of the most globally recognized tales of all time. It's told to children before they're even old enough to read. It's inspired some of the most iconic artwork in history. But the question I'm asking today is, did this story open the floodgates to a current of misogyny and sexism that persists to this very day? Professor Kimberly Hamlin, who's written extensively on this subject and who is a historian of women's history, is going to join me in Hour 2 to talk about the Adam and Eve story. But before I bring on my guest, here's what I'm thinking about in real time. She's back. Yes, 3-time Olympic gold medalist Gabby Douglas just announced on Instagram that she would return to gymnastics to compete in 2024. Now, as you all will remember, Gabby last competed in the 2016 Summer Olympics. She posted on her Instagram page hinting that she would be back in 2024 for the Paris Olympics. If Gabby Douglas is to qualify, she's 27 years old, so can't forget that she's older than most of her competitors will be. She would be, in fact, the oldest woman to qualify for the U.S. gymnastics team. Now, this is according to the Olympics website. There also, remember, Olympic champion Simone Biles and Sunisa Lee have also returned to training. So we may see them as well in the 2024 Paris Olympics. Douglas's career has been historic. Remember, at the 2012 London Olympics, she became the first Black woman to win gold in the individual all-around event. She and her teammates on the 2012 U.S. Olympics gymnastics team, nicknamed the Fierce Five, went on to win team gold. We remember also that in 2017, Gabby Douglas shared on her Instagram page that she, sadly, had been abused by Larry Nassar, the former national team doctor. Douglas was really honest on her page, or just sharing the state of her mental health and the trauma that she had been through. She said, "I went through hell times 2. Gabby said she lost her joy, she lost her passion, her fire, her love, and then she said she even lost herself. She talked about how there was so much dark and hidden with regards to the traumatic experience she had with Larry Nassar. You all will remember that he is now serving basically a life sentence in jail for sexually abusing just countless numbers of young women, particularly young women who were part of the U.S. Olympics gymnastics team. He was recently actually stabbed in prison, got into a fight over the television, over women's tennis match. But I am so happy that Gabby Douglas is finding her peace, that she is finding how to get back to her joy, how to get back to the sport that she loves. And how amazing would it be for her at 27 years old to be the oldest woman, and obviously that would make her the oldest Black woman on the U.S. gymnastic team competing for Olympic gold. I just say, go ahead, Gabby, with your bad self. We are here. We're cheering for you. We're rooting for you. We got your back. We love you. And we just love what you stand for. So let's make sure we are all lifting up Gabby Douglas in her efforts to return to the U.S. gymnastics team. We are all going to be watching and cheering for you. When we come forward, more with today's trending news with my expert contributors right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
Gotta stay fresh, ma. House shot with a rest bar.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
The bounce is back.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 15.
Like a brand new flavor in your ear. Yeah.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search, but we are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we
This is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. And in this hour, we are tracking today's trending news, and my expert contributors are here. Shayla Lawson, she's a professor at Amherst College, and Chris Scott, he's a Democratic strategist. We're going to spend the next hour breaking down today's trending news. The first piece of news that caught my attention today, Chris, was the news that Ron DeSantis, running for president as a Republican, not doing very well in the polls, some pretty disturbing numbers out this weekend about how much he has raised, but more importantly, how much money he is churning through. Also reports that he's shaking up his campaign team, obviously not happy at the work that they're doing and the fact that he still is polling so far behind Donald Trump. But this story about Ron DeSantis really caught my attention, and it's that he is considering Governor of Iowa, Kim Reynolds, to be his running mate. So for the last week or so, we've been trying to figure out why Kim Reynolds, who Donald Trump says he helped win her race as governor in Iowa, why she was so cozy with Ron DeSantis, why she wouldn't endorse Donald Trump, who she obviously had a very close relationship with, who was there to support her when she ran for governor. And now we know that the two of them, Kim Reynolds and Ron DeSantis, have been working on her being his running mate. And that's why she can't endorse Donald Trump. And that's why she's so cozy with Ron DeSantis. How did this news, hit you, Chris, when you learned that Kim Reynolds and Ron DeSantis are, working on something together?
Well, I think, unfortunately, I think they're a match made in heaven when you look at that Republican primary. I mean, I think Governor Reynolds just got done signing a 6-week abortion ban in Iowa. So I think, on the record wise, it tracks. And again, for DeSantis, it's a brilliant move, even if she doesn't end up being the pick, to float it out there, it looks like, hey, I'm looking at a woman. You got to think he's looking for some type of positive traction after the last couple of weeks. I think we talked about it on the show, him struggling with the ad that he put out. So he needs something to go right for him at this point. And so I think that's one of the things. Let's float it out there. I mean, hey, when Joe Biden was running, he floated out real early that even though it wasn't a name, that he was going to pick a Black woman probably to be the VP pick. And so I think you look at DeSantis and it's another tactical move on his part.
And Chris, what about this news coming out this weekend that DeSantis is just churning, burning through his money at a rate that is not sustainable, and the shakeup of his campaign team. Now, obviously, it's early, so if you're going to change team members, it's better to do it now than to do it a month before the election. But all of this points to the DeSantis campaign that was supposed to be the alternative to Donald Trump. Just every metrics that we look at is coming up as a failure. This is not the guy that was supposed, the guy who was supposed to be the alternative to Donald Trump was supposed to have it together, was going to, really, I thought, come out the gate strong. And we're seeing something totally opposite from DeSantis.
Yeah, I think just with this, DeSantis doesn't really know how to campaign. I mean, I think he got a little bit lucky in the fact that he's running in a state like Florida, but I think you're seeing now where his real internal struggles are. Yes, it's not the end of the world to, change campaign folks early on, but also, no, it's a flag when everybody expected you to be a real contender and you're not that long into your campaign, only a few months, and you're already having a major shakeup. I think it just signals, the kind of turmoil that does exist, and that he is feeling a little bit of the heat of, I got to get something to start sticking. Otherwise, people are going to start looking at the alternatives. They're going to look at a Tim Scott. They're going to look at a Chris Christie and say, look, DeSantis doesn't look like he can get it done. He can't even manage the money we gave him. We're going to hedge our bets with somebody else.
Yeah, I think these red flags at some point, like you said, the donor class in particular starts to say this guy doesn't have what it takes. He's not ready for prime time. He can't go the distance. It's going to be very difficult to convince people that he is an alternative to Donald Trump when he keeps making mistake after mistake after mistake. Let me ask you this, Professor Lawson, jump in. We're talking about potential vice presidents. Donald Trump is floating not only those who are running on the Republican ticket like Tim Scott, but he's also saying maybe Robert Kennedy Jr., who himself is running for president as a Democrat. What is that about?
To be honest, I kind of love it. I kind of love that he's going back to his reality roots and just saying, forget politics. This is really just a circus. There's something that kind of sparks joy in me about the fact that he would go this direction, simply because when we look at Bobby Kennedy and the ways that Bobby Kennedy has had to divorce, his family has divorced themselves from him in relation to their longstanding Democratic political political dynasty, and the fact that he is kind of the black sheep. He has shown a lot of anti-vax opinions, a lot of opinions that the family has outright had to come out and make statements and say that Bobby Kennedy Jr. does not represent us. There is a place in which it's a representation of what's actually happening with politics when we're looking at Trump. People aren't that concerned about whether Trump is a Republican candidate. They're mostly Trumpites at this point. And so combining with another political dynasty that has this cachet, particularly like this popularity cachet, even if it's coming from this Democratic strain, is a much more representative conversation about what's actually happening in our political sphere today. Because the one thing that I would would say about Ron DeSantis' choice is that he's done everything wrong except the fact that he's picked an Iowa Republican, because of the fact that Iowa itself represents this middle of the road, this place where American politics are really divided upon the issues. And the fact that he's picked somebody who has a longstanding history of running as a Republican within Iowa says that he is actually trying to diversify, or at least somebody in his campaign is actually trying to diversify the conversation by picking somebody that does pull in people who are really concerned about Republican issues as opposed to issues that affect the far right. And we have Trump, on the other hand, who is really just running on pageantry and circus. So it is going to be a question of like, what are Republican values at this point? Are Republican values a question of who is leaning toward the far right, or is it really just who are the Trumpites?
Yeah, and Chris, it seems like the Republican Party is the party of Donald Trump. It's the MAGA party, and I'm not sure there's a lane for Ron DeSantis and this governor from Iowa that would look like a dream team pre-Donald Trump. That would be, a standard Republican ticket where you have a male governor and now a female governor, both who've been fairly successful in their states. That would have looked pretty normal pre-Donald Trump, but Donald Trump enters the equation and they look like outsiders outside of the Republican base, because you can't get to the general unless you can get through the Republican primary, which is what brings me up, Chris, to this story that's very interesting to me, that Trump and his allies are publicly stating that if he is reelected, they're going to seize pretty much power from every branch of the federal government and place it in the hands of Donald Trump. We already know he's going to be on a revenge tour, trying to, take out his revenge on all of the people, i.e. the Democrats that he has beef with, probably having his attorney general investigate them, seeing if he can get them prosecuted, arrested, etc. But now he's talking openly about taking over aspects of the federal government and putting more power in the hands of, i.e. him, the president. It seems like that would not be something you'd want to advertise, particularly since, when you had power, you handled it so poorly. Why do you think Trump is so blatantly talking about the restructuring of government? Is that something that he thinks plays with independents? I mean, I'm sure it plays well with his base. But again, we start thinking about a general election. Is this something you think independents would be happy with, to see the president with the kind of power he's talking about?
Well, I don't know if he's fully thinking about the independents. I think what he's thinking about is the number of people that are still allies to him, despite everything that is going on with him possibly getting indicted with everything in the January 6th hearings and what's going on there. I think what you're seeing is a Trump that's going to lean into the crazy that he knows best. And what Trump knows how to do is publicly wage war and make it a popular idea, make himself look right for it. I mean, I think at the end of the day, though, what we do know is if we get Donald Trump reelected, we can pretty much say goodbye to democracy and appoint him dictator for life, because that's how he's going to run our government.
And that's what I'm so surprised by, Dr. Lawson, that he's being so open. We know that in his brain, he wants to be a dictator. We know that many MAGA folks that support him think that he deserves, for some reason, to be a dictator. And they think that he should have the kind of power that his team obviously is looking to transfer into the executive office. And so they're saying this agenda, this agenda has deep roots in the decades-long effort by a lot of conservative legal thinkers to undercut what has become known as the administrative state. They want to take over those agencies, those that are responsible for the air, our water, our food, our drugs, consumer products, all of that. They want to say, no agencies, we're going to control that. We're going to dictate, how drugs get approved in this country. And if we want chlorine to be the cure for COVID, it's going to be chlorine is the cure for COVID, because it's Donald Trump's way. But it strikes me that that's such a risky strategy, because I'm not sure this country wants Donald Trump to be our next dictator.
But people love the pageantry and the fervor of an oligarchy. They love, and that's the reality TV aspect. I've being here in Kentucky. Now that I'm back in my home state, I've gone on the ground and I've just been like, I need y'all to level with me. I need y'all to explain to me how this is all working out here and why it is that Trump has such a footing here. And so many of the people that I talk to say that their family is voting for Trump not because they believe in what he believes in, but because of the ways that he has rallied them, the ways that they feel united. And that's the unfortunate thing, is that it's not a head vote, it's a heart vote. It's for the sensibility that America has some kind of solidarity. And I think that it's really frightening to people to look at the kind of intelligence and bifurcation that's happening in America right now as well, because that is what equity looks like, is when you have to start considering lots of different people's opinions and lots of different people's understanding of how the world should work to make them feel comfortable. That is very confusing for the average person. And what Trump does is not, because what he is saying is like, this is how it's going to be. And a lot of people like that shepherd, that herding into the direction of, okay, I don't have to think about this. I don't have to learn new things. I don't have to consider who I am in a new value system. I can reassert the idea that all the things that I've learned up until this point can be rallied behind Trump. And he's really good at keeping people in the dark about what is actually for their benefit as America moves forward.
Yeah, when we come forward, more of today's trending news with my expert contributors right here on KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the leader at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Keep following the leader. Follow 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 the leader.
Gotta stay fresh, my house shot with a rest spot.
Have you visited us online for the grand opening of KBLA.store? For the best in new merch, gift ideas, books, media, and more, log on to KBLA.store. Be sure to check out our KBLA team favorites at KBLA.store today. That's KBLA.store for all the official merch on your favorite talk radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
Bounce is back.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your ear.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show, weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your ear.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search, but we are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580. Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
I'm young, gifted, and black.
KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon, honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Connection established. Access granted.
In a survey conducted by the public opinion research firm Eviderus, KBLA Talk 1580 consistently emerged as the station of choice for black audiences in the Los Angeles media market and beyond. The survey also revealed that the vast majority of black audiences are concerned about the lack of black-owned media and are more likely to listen to talk radio that focuses on issues that impact the black community. For some reason, the other talk stations haven't quite figured that out.
If you think about KFI, well, KFI only has like a 3% black listenership. 3%. So there's a good 97% out there to support a station like KBLA.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Your black. Your black.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
Be sure to follow us on Instagram at KBLA 1580.
Follow the leader.
Are you ready?
The station leading the way with exclusive interviews,
Follow the leader.
stimulating conversation, and intellectual discourse that empowers, enlightens, and informs.
Follow the leader.
Follow the
This is hour one of Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. And in this hour, we are tracking today's trending news and giving you some expert analysis. And my contributors in this hour, Professor Shayla Lawson and Democratic strategist Chris Scott. All right, Professor Lawson, I want to ask you about Reverend Jesse Jackson. So over this weekend, after 54 years as the president of Rainbow Push Coalition, it's 52 years, I'm sorry. He steps down. We know Reverend Jackson has had some health challenges. He announced a couple of years ago that he has Parkinson's disease. We know that he had a fall at Howard University not so long ago. And so he's saying, look, it's time for me to pass the baton. And he has selected Reverend Frederick Douglass Haynes, who has been a student of his and who also is a pastor at Friendship West Baptist Church in Dallas, to take over as president of Rainbow Push. But help us understand the significance of not only Jesse Jackson in terms of his contributions to the civil rights movement, but also as a politician, because we know he was ran for president once, but also the significance of the organization that he started, Rainbow Push.
There's just so much to work with, because I just think about how throughout the course of my life, I'm 40 years old, Jesse Jackson has been such a representative of a continuation of the civil rights movement, being someone who was right there with Dr. King during so much of the movement. Then during the 1980s, running for president, he did a bunch of things. Like one of the things that I think about a lot is the amount of time that he spent educating children during the time that, during the 80s and 90s, spending a lot of time on Nickelodeon, and spending a lot of time on the Disney Channel, making sure that there was an understanding that civil rights was not just about Black rights, that civil rights was about foundational rights for all people. And so for me, that's what the Rainbow Coalition has always represented, is the idea of how we merge the American Black Christian Front with the idea that civil rights is about equity for all people. And they've always done such a beautiful job of merging those conversations and being at the forefront of so many political advocacy campaigns that we've seen, whether it be state-related rights in New Orleans when it came to Katrina, or in New York City when it came to housing crises. And then in addition to that, the ways that they've continued kind of quietly and silently to bolster the political campaigns of other people that have come up through the ranks, the ways that they supported the Black Lives Matter movement, the ways that they've supported President Obama's campaigning. And so now to see Reverend Jesse Jackson turning over the reins to someone that he has mentored shows to me a lot of fortitude and foresight and strength, something that we often lack when it comes to the ways that we transition political conversations. There's usually just this cutoff of we had this voice, we had this power, and who's next? And so I'm really excited to see what his protege is going to do and what kind of ways that they have already strategized, what it looks like for that transition to happen. I feel a lot less worried about that kind of transition than I do, for instance, in the conversations we've had about the Democratic Party, and like, who are the young people that are really being mentored and fostered? Because for me, as somebody who grew up under like the very like gentle and stalwart hand of the Reverend Jesse Jackson and his political work over the last 40 years, I'm really confident in seeing who is going to follow in his footsteps, and really excited about it, and really hoping that this could become a model for the ways that we continue to educate and mentor people in other political facets as well.
Yeah, Chris, obviously Reverend Jesse Jackson is a historic figure and, leaves an incredible legacy with his leadership at Rainbow Push, but he hasn't always had such a great relationship with Democrats, established Democrats. And, let's start with Obama, the Obama, administration and Reverend Jesse Jackson, they were at odds at times. Reverend Jesse Jackson was not one of the early supporters of President Obama. He was a Hillary Clinton supporter. What do you think in terms of how the relationship between Jesse Jackson and Democrats stands today?
Well, I think of, when I was still coming up in politics, I think back to 2016 when I staffed Reverend Jesse Jackson when he came to Ohio to stump for Hillary. I think since that Obama campaign, even with, having times where he wasn't necessarily on the same line with the administration, I think he's still where he could still be active. I think he tried to be active in that. I think we're just, it's interesting the period that we're in, because I think we're losing so many of those civil rights icons, whether or not they're passing away or just stepping out the way because they can no longer handle it, or it's time to pass the torch. And so similar to Shayla, I really want to see, what comes next, because I think of Rainbow Push Coalition the same way I look at NAACP. What are we doing to continue the progress and morph these organizations to continue the fight today the way that these organizations were equipped for the fight back in the day?
Yeah, I guess at some point, Professor Lawson, the question becomes relevancy, right? What is the relevance of an organization like Rainbow Push? Obviously, throughout its 50-year history, 50 plus years, it's played a significant role. And to put that in context, this weekend, Black Lives Matter had a 10-year anniversary event in Los Angeles, and they had the mother of Trayvon Martin. She was one of the speakers, and others who came out to speak. And the LA Times ran an article saying, was this a goodbye celebration for Black Lives Matter, or was it really, a celebration to celebrate the next 10 years or 20 years of the organization? I think in this moment, we're asking the roles that many of our civil rights organizations play. I'm not sure where Black Lives Matter fits into that category. There's a lot of disputes about, where it is today, some of the internal fighting that's happened, some of the financial issues, that have been highlighted in the organization. But what's your sense about relevancy, particularly of a historic organization like Operation Push, and then a newer organization like BLM?
The relevance to me is critique. Like, one of the things that I think we benefit from in continuing to build upon the legacy of organizations is understanding the slight nuances and change that occur over time. So looking at the difference between the NAACP versus the Black Panther Party versus SNCC versus the Rainbow Push Coalition versus the Black Lives Matter movement versus all of the organizations that have bolstered and filtered everything in between. What we're constantly looking at is that the fight migrates, and so the ways that we fight have to change. And what I love about coming from a history, a plethora of all of these organizations, is that conversation in which we can ask ourselves, is this person, is this movement, is the way that we are idealizing the fight exactly what we need for the era that we live in right now? And so I think, just like the ways that we've seen these other organizations transition, Black Lives Matter will transition. It's had its moments of reckoning in terms of what it has represented. And I think that in response to that, we will continue to see new formations of either that organization or others that will continue the fight. So I just love that that's always been a part of the ways that that Black civil rights movements have happened in America, is that it's a continued push towards excellence, a continued push towards how can we be a better representation of what we need in terms of civil rights today than what we needed 60, 100, 200 years ago.
Yeah, when we come forward, I want to talk about Hispanic voters and, are we losing them as Democrats? Are they becoming increasingly more Republican voters? And Mike Pence. Let's talk about how much, or should I say how little, money he has been able to raise for his presidential campaign. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
This is a rather bold pronouncement, but we think we can back it up. If you come across a radio frequency anywhere putting more variety and more diversity on the air than KBLA Talk 1580, we sure would like to hear about your discovery.
You got to have vision.
You can search. We are confident that you won't find more shows covering more topics, hosted by a more diverse and inclusive lineup of talkers than the squad we have assembled here at KBLA Talk 1580.
This is the time, brothers. This is the time.
We've got something for everybody.
That's right.
Health and healing, history and humor, issues and events, empowerment and entertainment, all in one station.
What's really going on?
Free enterprise, you dig?
KBLA Talk 1580.
Yes.
Oh yeah. We got a lot to talk about.
King Kong ain't got on me.
If you're not listening to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings on KBLA Talk 1580, you're missing out. Everybody wants to talk to Tavis.
That's one reason, by the way, why I'm so thrilled to have this conversation with you today. The three people I always most hoped would interview me were Phil Donahue, Studs Terkel, and Tavis Smiley. Donahue's retired, Terkel's deceased, so this is a real thrill for me. And the reason why I have such respect for what you do is you have a historically informed conversation of depth and detail.
Be sure to tune in to Tavis Smiley weekday mornings, 9 a.m. to 12 noon on your unapologetically progressive radio station, KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580.
Is the pen mightier than the sword?
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. At KBLA Talk 1580, we not only have a lot to talk about, we have a lot to write about. Politics, relationships, business, empowerment, and culture. The all-star roster at KBLA Talk 1580 has you covered.
That's what it's all about.
Be sure to follow us on all our socials for our latest book releases, op-eds, essays, and commentaries from our hosts. And, of course, download the KBLA 1580 app as we strive to remain your most trusted, credible, and reliable source for the issues you care about. This is unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
What up, baby?
What are you gonna do? Make lots of
gifted and black. At KBLA Talk 1580, we do more than just talk.
Hey there, I'm Jared Hill, president of the National Association of Black Journalists of Los Angeles, and I just want to say thank you for the benevolent $10,000 donation and scholarships for the next generation of black journalists.
And I'm Haywood Galbraith, photojournalist and founder of the Minority Photojournalism Institute. Thanks, KBLA, for your generous $10,000 scholarship gift to help us train the next generation of black photojournalists.
Congratulations to all the students who will benefit from the scholarship dollars raised at our Black History Month luncheon, honoring black legends in LA media. When we come forward at KBLA Talk 1580, we're bringing everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us. Everybody with us.
Connection established. Access granted.
In a survey.
All right, Chris, I don't want to sound the alarm yet, but what's going on with Hispanic voters? There's an article out today saying that Democratic Party is continuing to lose Latino voters. Now, we know that, again, overwhelmingly, I should say, the majority of Latinos in this country still are registered Dems and vote Democratic. But there's been a significant drop from 72% in 2018 to 60% in 2022, if you are to believe this Pew Research Center poll. And we know Republicans are going after Democrats pretty hard, particularly in states like Florida and Texas and other places. One, is this something that Dems should be concerned about? And two, what are Democrats doing to stem the tide?
Well, I think Dems definitely, it's something that we can't take for granted. I think if you look at a place even like California, you're a few percentage points away if Latinos start voting the other way for it not being a Democratic stronghold anymore. And I think one of the things to look at when we look at this dip is look at a place like Florida where, for the first time in a long time, Democrats lost Miami. Well, we also know overwhelmingly the population of Miami skews a little bit more Latino. And when we're talking about Cuban Latino immigrants versus Mexican immigrants, the issues that they care about are really different on a lot of things. And so I think if Democrats want to be successful, I think it's the same problem that sometimes Democrats have with Black people. They want to treat them as a monolith, and we just can't do that. With Latinos, I know the two prominent issues that has always been, no matter what state I went into, economics and abortion were two big issues for them. And I think it's going to continue to be that for a while. But I think Pew also pointed out they're looking at rises in climate change and still also looking at some of the things on immigration. So I think there's work to do there, but I think it can quickly be shored up. And I think it's a couple of states that show that dip a little bit more versus it actually fully trending towards that way.
And that's interesting when you said the top two issues are economics and abortion. I would have thought one of the two top issues would have been immigration. Obviously, as you pointed out, that Pew Research says immigration is an issue, but it's not one of the top two you said that you saw as you got into different states. So, one, are you surprised by that, Professor Lawson, that immigration isn't, one or two? And then this issue of abortions. Democrats are clearly pro-choice. And if Hispanic voters are, I guess the research shows many of them are more conservative. They're Catholic, they're staunch Catholics, they're pro-life, or they're not pro-choice. How can Dems win them back if the fundamental issue of abortion is driving them to the Republican Party?
So to answer the first part of your question, am I surprised that immigration is not one of the top issues? Well, no, for many of the reasons that Chris mentioned. We spent too much time treating Latinx people in this country as if they're a monolith. And so many of the people who are voting are looking at themselves and having to distance themselves from the conversation of immigration because of how contentious it's been, and having to reassert what it means for them to be American in ways that are very different than the ways that we as African Americans look at it. We like the ethnic tie to the idea that we are slightly to the left of what it means to be an American. And from what I've noticed in relation to a lot of Latinx or Hispanic people, people. They want to centralize the conversation that maintains that as voters, they are Americans, that the American identity is one that usurps their other cultural ties, which are more related to family. And so when we're talking about family, that's where we start getting the abortion issue in, because when they're starting to vote in relation to what are their family values, that is the connection, is that the Democratic Party is the anti-abortion party, or that's the way that it's being espoused. The other thing that we have to think about is in relation to what Chris mentioned with the difference between Cuban Americans versus Mexican Americans, for instance. The leader of the Proud Boys was a brown-skinned, Cuban American. So there is a conversation in which they are being brought into the idea that, the nationalistic fervor that is part of the right, that is also a place for you. And we haven't created the same kind of home on the Democratic side, on the side of being people of
push back on that, because first of all, this notion that they're not a monolith, no, they're not monolithic, nor are we monolithic, but it's impossible for a national party, whether it's Democratic or Republican, to play to every subgroup of folks, whether they're Cuban or Guatemalan or Mexican. And then when you say we haven't, appealed to them, and you talk about economics, the billions of dollars of loan debt, student loan debt that Biden just, was able to relieve borrowers from, many of those borrowers are Latin American people. And many of the policies, the infrastructure bill, the ARPA, all of those economic policies benefit Latin voters as well. So I don't know if I buy this argument that Democrats aren't, speaking to the issue of economics, and that's what Latin voters are, highly focused on.
It's not the issue of economics, it's the face. We don't have a conversation that gives facial recognition to the idea that Latinx voters have different are looking at different issues. And the Republican Party has started to create those avenues. And so that is something we are going to have to
agree with that. How is that, Chris? You work as a Democratic strategist. Kamala Harris knows when she goes to Florida that she's talking to a lot of Cuban Americans who have issues that are very different than when she comes to California and she's talking to Mexican American immigrants. Democrats are smart. They get that Cuban Americans and Mexican Americans may have different issues and different priorities.
Yeah, well, I think still when we're talking about Democratic politics, I think one of the things that Democrats are notorious for is being late on when they come into a community and how they come into a community. I think when we look in places like Florida and Texas, even with all the nastiness that we know from the Republican Party, they do a better job of showing up on a daily basis, talking about some of these issues, and for the fact that we know abortion is a really wedge issue because of the faith aspect, especially in Texas, they lean heavy into the wedge issue the way that we don't lean into, even when we've been good on economics. And so I think we're also talking about how well we're leaning into our message and to even let somebody know, hey, we have showed up for you. When you look at the Republican Party, you're starting to see a lot more Latino people as the face in that party. Democrats, even though we have Latino members, you're not necessarily seeing those members, Latino and Latinas, as the projected face. You're starting to see that a little bit more after 2022. I think of Delia Ramirez, Congresswoman Ramirez, Congressman Casar down in Texas, but we're just now getting more facial recognition with those type of folks, where the Republicans have already done a better job, I think, at times of giving Latinos a pathway forward to these higher offices.
A Latino woman appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court before a Black woman.
Well, absolutely. But think about it. I mean, just think about the facial recognition for Justice Sotomayor versus Ted Cruz. And think of the state that Ted Cruz represents. And think of what it means when Black people's...
But I don't understand that comparison. Democrats don't have anything to do with Ted Cruz.
No, but what I'm saying is when it comes to Texas, and when we think about Texas politics and what it means to represent Texas politics, Black people still have a tendency culturally to feel that we are part of the Latinx movement because of the fact that we're all dealing with minority issues. And quite often, particularly when it comes to Latinx conversations in the Southern sphere, they look at themselves and see where they need to distance themselves from that conversation because they don't feel represented. They don't feel like our representation is the same as their representation. And I'm not even saying this is an argument that I agree with. It's something that I've had
back on y'all on this. We're going to run out of time. We're not going to get to finish. We're going to have you all back to talk about this because Latinx voters, all voters, benefit from the work that African Americans do. Y'all know we lead the way and then folks follow us. And I think we need to be having a conversation about helping people understand all the sacrifices, all the work, all the advocacy that we do that create the opportunities, whether it's, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris or having Ketanji Brown Jackson now in the Supreme Court. So we don't have enough time. Can't finish this conversation. Thank you so much, Shayla Lawson, professor at Amherst and author of This Is Major. Thank you, Chris Scott, Democratic strategist. Got to have both of you back so we can have this conversation about Latino voters and how Democrats are doing with it. And I'm going to be talking in hour 2 with Congressman Ro Khanna from California. So I'm going to ask him this question about Democrats and how the Democratic Party is messaging to Latino voters, what they're, in his opinion, are doing right, what they're doing wrong, and what the Democratic Party needs to do to get ready for the election next year. And I'm going to specifically ask him, Chris, about your question about California in terms of how close we may be to losing the majority Dems of Latino voters in a state like California. All of that's coming up in the second hour of Areva Martin in real time. So don't touch that dial. Some news and sports are coming up. And when we come forward, more on KBLA Talk 1580.
Here comes the brand new flavor in your head.
Race, social justice, sports, politics, art, music, culture. We do it all on the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show. If you're not tuning in, then you are definitely missing out. It's the D.L. Hughley Afternoon Show weekdays from 2 to 4 only on unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580.
Like a brand new flavor in your head.